my name is Kirsty Dignam and I'm here to briefly, and I mean briefly, look at really setting that intention. Look at the energies for this week, beginning the 3rd of June, and how to best navigate them. Now, the reason I share the word briefly is to have boundaries, not just with my connection, but with myself and the amount of energy I am willing to share in response to what I get back. Now, I've always been, those that know me, a firm believer that what we give isn't dependent on what we receive. However, this week, some views, some beliefs around that as we lead into the new moon in Gemini are going to be portrayed and mirrored back to us for the wounds that are underlying them. So the reason I'm going to do briefly is an example of mine. I've been really feeling into the past 2 weeks actually since the full moon in Sagittarius, which was a bit of a biggie for me. I must admit, I don't know if anyone else has been feeling that. Totally unexpected. We had the eclipse, we had everything else that was going on, and these big points that were going to be the turning aspects. However, it's almost like the underdog of the Sagittarius full moon just came out of the gate running, you know, like this is where you need to look, this is what it's all been about. And the last 2 weeks that's really brought that up for me in response to my own masculinity, which is the energy trying to come through for me personally. Why? Because come the solstice, we're being encouraged the 21st of June to look at that turning point of the year. We are 6 months into the year, and that's not to cause a fight or flight reaction, but that's to say we are halfway through 2024 and the energy that this gave us, which collectively was the energy of strength, but also the energy of justice and courage and balance and harmony and having the ability to speak our truth and align with our own authenticity. Because from next year onwards, when we go into that 9-year, it's that light that we're going to be taking forward. So mine obviously has been out of balance in regards to my own masculinity, and the Sagittarius full moon for me really brought up an underlying wound here. You know, the great wisdom and intuition that I've developed over the years with my feminine and really embracing that, but also the fear that comes with the masculine and the being able to take action with that. This week in particular, we're going to be shown where we may be out of balance. It may be intuitively, are we comfortable with feeling what we're feeling? Or it may be, are we comfortable with taking action based on that? Because it goes beyond the feminine, the masculine, to the sacred union now. It's one thing to feel something, it's another thing to do. Or it's another thing to act out, but another to feel. And we're going to be really shown where we're in harmony, or perhaps where we're not, and the reasons behind it. So for me, I have a Chiron in Taurus, which means I have this real wound of loss, which comes up in how I react to something, and a fear of that being taken out of perspective or out of context and losing things that are important to me as a result. So that does diminish my masculine actions, and that comes from a real sense of not feeling worthy or being too much or not enough or whatever that may be. And it's going to come up for us all this week. What is actually going on? Why aren't we acting out the things that we feel we need to? You know, there may be things that have come to light where we think we've done this. Well, if we have, why are we going back over it? We may feel as if we've brought this into our life and we've learned all we can from this. So if we have, why is it still coming back up? What is being reflected here? Where do we perhaps not believe in our own ability to finish cycles and patterns, to really take what we have sensed and form that into a response rather than reaction? There is a big difference. So for me, as I mentioned, it does come through with the masculine, and it comes through in my own belief in the masculine and my own wounds in the masculine there. But more importantly, this week we can say it's because of X, Y, and Z externally, but again, bringing that back in, receiving the medicine that is coming up here and seeing how that affects our actions, really embodying what is going on or not. And obviously there's always choice, as with this reading, there's always choice. I'm just going to cancel that. I'm just going to cancel any notifications externally, which feels really quite important for me personally, because they can be distracting, and that may be what we feel as well this week. So I've really been aware of where my energy has been diluted because it's in places where it shouldn't be, and more importantly where I may actually be diluting situations and making them more confusing because they were fuck all to do with me, okay, or They are asking me to be in the energy that I bring to the table, which all of us, if we're unable to step in who we are, we're not grounded in our vibration, therefore we're confused in our energy and we're going to confuse the situation. So really taking a step back this week, what is going on? What is being asked of me, if anything? Now that means that we're sat with uncomfortable feelings, right? So again, my masculine wants to save and protect and rescue, and that leaves the uncomfortable position of this isn't actually needed. So what then wants to come through instead of that? And we are in this place of holding space for the old, but knowing that it is not dying, being reabsorbed as part of the journey, that is no longer needed to be taken forward as the sole emphasis. Okay, so yes, we can learn from our wounds, but we don't take that pain forward. We take what we have learned from our wounds forward. And again, that's a choice. I cannot advocate that enough. And that's going to be needed to be made really clear this week. Just because we may want something, someone else may not. And that is their prerogative. Okay, and having belief not in external circumstances, but in ourselves to maneuver, adapt, rise for some from what may not have panned out the way that we would have liked. Now, the other thing that came up this week is also to recognise the importance of expectations. Just because something doesn't come up the way that we want it to come out doesn't mean that it's not worth having expectations. Expectations are what makes us actually want to do something in the first place. If we didn't have that initial, oh, I would like this, we wouldn't create anything. We wouldn't do anything. We wouldn't go after relationships or jobs or whatever. But because they don't quite turn out how we may have wanted them to turn out, doesn't mean, and I feel that in the heart, doesn't mean that we don't have expectations. And there's this a big collective thing here where we're almost trying to protect ourselves from rejection, from the pain of not getting what we want, from the pain of believing that somehow if it doesn't quite pan out how we wanted it to, we're not in alignment. If we could just see the bigger perspective of what's actually going on, about how we're discovering parts of ourselves and our own sacred union, about how we are holding space for our feelings and our intuition and how we then act on them, it's that that's actually being shifted and healed. But if we keep things to a minimum of we shouldn't have expectations, we shouldn't do this, we shouldn't do that, then we are actually limiting and restricting ourselves. And that's where there's a bit of a wound with the patriarchy and the matriarchy within us. Why? Come the solstice, it's about this sacred union. It's about how our own feminine can receive our own masculine actions, and it's about how we can act based on our intuition. It really is about that union and that co-creation within us come the solstice. So we're being given this opportunity to feel into what we want and have the belief, the courage, the determination, the willpower, the divine connection to know that that will come through however it needs to come through based on our actions at that time, and that there is no right or wrong, but that awareness is required. So on that note, I'm 10 minutes in. I am going to look into the energy of this week. I'm going to do it in a very direct manner. This is what's happening. This is what is suggested we can do with it as a result. Okay. I'm seeing the Holy Grail for the feminine, and I'm seeing the sword, the sword from the water, the Lady in the Lake, Excalibur, as the masculine, and seeing how they connect and how they confuse within us. Confuse, not confuse, but there is some confusion there. Particularly, we're in Gemini season, right? So there's that backwards and forwards with our mind, and that can really start to take over. But remember, Gemini on the tree of life, Gemini in the tarot is in Tippereth, it's in the solar plexus, it's in the soul energy, it's in the drive, it's in the willpower. It's also in harmony, beauty and love. Okay, so 6, Gemini is 6 and it's the lovers in the tarot, so there is that balance and harmony. It does mean we may go back in order, to go forward this month. But that's all part of it. That's an opportunity to recognise what we no longer need to carry on our path, what we've actually discovered. It doesn't mean we have to go through the whole process again. And I cannot state this enough. When we're going over something, it isn't from the same perspective because we are aware that we're going over it. So if we're aware we are repeating something, we're not actually repeating it because it's different. And that is really down to us to acknowledge the differences. What has changed? rather than focusing on what hasn't. And again, all is choice. That's the Lover's card, right? This is all choice. This is all divine will. Recognizing that, owning that, and taking responsibility for that. Taking on board our wounds, taking on board our journey, really with compassion, but with awareness and with truth and integrity. This week is going to be key as we lead into the new moon in Gemini, I think. Anyway, that was the other thing. I found myself drawn to look at the new moon today, but it was a real, Princess of Wands here. It was a real put my foot in, not get too caught in all the information that's out there. Need to know basis, and being comfortable with that, being comfortable with we may not have all the parts that we're looking for, but it's a need to know basis. We show up, we do, that changes the outcome, that then changes what we need to know, that then, and it is in the doing that we figure out what is going on, not in having all the facts and everything being perfect first. It is in the courage to take that first step. Okay, that becomes the need to know basis, because it's not a need to know basis as in things are being hidden from us. It's a need to know basis as in we're not going to find them out until we actually get out there to discover them. We're not going to know what it's like to be in a relationship or a different job, or, you know, to take everything that we have gained and move forward with that until we actually do it. That's the final part of the learning before that next process. And yes, there is an unknown there, because that is where we look at the belief that we have in ourselves, the guiding force, the source, whatever that may be, but ultimately our ability to connect to that, because that is what this year is about. How much do we believe in our connection to our own source, whatever that may be? Okay. And how do we find that out? In the journey. We find that out in the journey. The ups, the downs, the peaks, the troughs, the rise, the fall. That's how we find out, what we're made of this week. Okay. And like myself, you may have found yourself holding that back because it can be a bit daunting or a bit too much, but actually that doesn't really do much for our belief in ourselves, because what we do is we end up bringing in these what we see as repetitive scenarios, so that we can reaffirm and reaffirm and reaffirm what we already know. I love the amount of times people come to me for a tarot reading and it's something that they already know. Well, yes, of course. How many times do we need to keep reaffirming what we already know before we act on it? And that is going to be one of the biggest questions this week. Okay, energies this week and how to best navigate them. The Nine of Wands. How much more can we take? How much more of this journey are we willing to put up with in the same scenarios before we actually say, this is what I needed to take from it all. This is what I've learned from it all. This is now my opportunity to move forward with that. It is 9 and it is completion. He doesn't look too happy about it. Obviously, he looks a bit like a wounded warrior here. But, you know, our healing comes in the ointment that we apply to the wounds, not the wounds themselves. So really, really feeling into that this week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Overall, let's put that to one side. And that feels important. One, these cards are a bit too big for my table. It's like the story has got too big. That's what it actually feels like. The story has got bigger than it actually needed to be, and there's only so much room, there's only so much space within us to carry these things forward. And we're going to feel that. We're going to feel as if we're at the point of bursting this week. One of the things that I felt earlier when I tuned into the energy was that sweet spot, you know, that delayed gratification, that having to wait, and it almost getting really a bit too much. So finding what we need in order to remain on the precipice this week, because things are moving, they are shifting us forward, and it is going to be a natural change, a natural progression. However, how can we stay in that point of it not quite being the past, but it not quite being the future, right at that pivotal edge? And that is where we are this week. I was going to say this morning, so maybe just this morning. There may be a tipping point actually on the Monday. So overall, we do have the energy of the Eight of Swords, and this card came up when I put to one side the Nine of Wands. So when we put to one side all of our stories, when we put to one side all of our traumas and everything that we perceive has given us the strength, that's the thing, isn't it? We can call upon our journey and say, well, we gained strength from this, and we did this, and we did this. And then you get someone like me come along and say, let go of it all. And it's like, well, actually, that's everything that I am. So when we push that to one side, what happens? Who am I? What now? Where do I go from here? This is everything I thought I was going to do. This is everything I thought that I was. And there's a real soreness in the throat there of communication that hasn't been listened to. It was never about the journey. It was never about the hardships. It was never about the times that we rose or fell. It was about the how do we see ourselves? Are we a victim? Are we trapped? Is there nothing that we can do about it? Or can we just release ourselves and step out of whatever is going on here? How? Well, on the Monday there's a turning point, and I did feel that turning point. There was something about the story not fitting here, and there's something I need to come back to. But on the Monday there is a turning point in how we choose to alchemize this energy. I was having a beautiful conversation with a friend of mine today, and it's not about not feeling these things, but it's about what do we choose to do with this energy, thought, deed and action or word. What do we choose to actually do with this energy? It comes in, we feel this scenario that rises up. Are we going to let it sit there? If we let it sit there, are we going to breathe so that it carries on moving, or is it going to stay in our body? And if it stays in our body then says, like any infection, like any virus, hang on, I know this story. I know this story, and I know this story from X, Y, and Z. So all of a sudden, these other stories, these other times that we felt this way start to come over and connect to whatever it is we are sensing. So it's no longer an argument with your loved one, or, not knowing what it is you want to do in your life. It's every time you haven't known what you wanted to do in your life, or every argument you've had with a loved one. And this wound suddenly gets a lot bigger, and it's a bit like flies around shit. How do you then get rid of it? Well, you alchemize it. You use the fertilizer. What do I want to do with this? Maybe write something, maybe go for a dance, maybe do some drawing, maybe scream, maybe decide, actually, I'm not doing this anymore. Actually, that was then. What's coming up now is my indecision of what to do in this moment, not all the 20, 30, X amount of years beforehand. It's up to us to say, right, this is where I am in my cycle. I may still be in this traumatic response. So what do I need? And there's a real big tipping point here that it's going to be different. It's going to be a different action. It's very likely to be the very action that you've been avoiding. Okay, and that's when we come full circle in our learning. And that tipping point is available on the Monday. We do have a week of new beginnings and major arcanas, which is really beautiful, because then once we have that tipping point, once we say, oh, I don't know, what has worked before is no longer working, and actually I need to do something different here because I'm getting the same results or the same things are coming through. That's when we open our heart and go, what is really underneath all of this? And come the Tuesday, that's an opportunity there to connect to our own divinity, to connect to our own version of compassion, to the love that we are. One of the things that's come up for me this week is my own view of compassion, actually. And yes, it's multi-dimensional like everything, right? But for me personally, there comes a point when that's enough now. That's enough now. One of the most compassionate things can be to have those boundaries, not with other people, but with ourselves. So that we say, do you know what, heart, I've gone over this. I've questioned this. I've done this. I've learned from this. I can see this. But actually, this isn't sustaining me anymore. That's enough. What do I need to bring in now? What's the most compassionate thing that can happen in this situation for all involved, ourselves included? And on the Tuesday, that's really going to come to light, thankfully, because, God, I'm on a record, 18 minutes, because on the Wednesday, we have the Star card. So from that place of compassion, from that place of not trying to figure things out, but feeling into it as we lead into the new moon. I mean, the new moon is on the place of the lovers, but as we start to feel that energy of the new moon, and I see all the planets aligning as well in the sky, that's coming up either today or the next few days. But as we start to move into the energy of the new moon, yes, things have changed. Our vision has changed. What we want has changed. And that's where we have to let our shoulders drop and let our heart expand. So much being held in, when we get to that point, and for some being at that point of almost achieving what they want for such a long time, it can really tense the body up. Okay, so think, pre-release, whether that's childbirth, orgasm, runner's high, whatever it may be, you get that build up of almost lactic acid, that tension, and there's a lot of that there that's stopping the body from moving, stopping the body from being in its raw, vulnerable state. So on the Tuesday, allowing our heart to open, allowing ourselves to surrender to this complete abyss of unknown and being right on the edge of that change, so that on the Wednesday we can allow what needs to come through to be seen. And it will be parts of our vision, our hopes, our dreams that have shifted. because we have shifted. We're not trying to control the outcome. Yes, we have expectations, but we're not attached to attached to what that looks like. We're not attached to what that looks like. I looked at the Magician today for the Monday, and I'm a big fan of Eminem. I put it out there. I love his music, and he's just come back with another song, and there's a lot of knee-jerk reactions, which was to be expected. It's why he does what he does. So being very aware of why we do what we do and the reactions that we get, and why we do what we do to get the reactions that we get. I'm acutely aware that I will overstep the mark, share things that haven't been asked, so that I can then get almost berated back, so I don't have to get involved. So okay, what's really going on there? I didn't want to get involved in the first place. Okay, so really looking at why we do what we do and the reactions that we get, and where that is actually coming from in regards to what we're creating, particularly at the beginning of the week. Opening our heart to that, having compassion and humour and lightness with that, seeing things for what they are, ourselves included. But also I noticed with Eminem's song, he's bringing back the old Slim Shady, and he's looking at the world as it is now, like, what the hell is going on here? What the actual fuck? And we may find that on the Wednesday. We may look at a lot of our visions and think, what was I thinking? What was I actually thinking? So having compassion there and remembering that it was done from a place of where you were. Visions change, we change. It's all part of the process, and lightening it up and just going, oh my God. Yeah, we may have a few moments where we think, who have I been all this time? What is actually going on? Particularly with myself, I know, bringing back my own masculine, it's like, boom, get in, get the job done, get out again. And it's, oh my God, my life could have been so much easier if I just embraced this masculine energy within me. So, but also acknowledging that's part of the path. So come the Wednesday, yeah, we may have things come up that make us go, whoa, what is going on here? Really, what is it? Having a good hard look at our reality, and from that perspective saying this isn't good enough and letting it go. Okay, but also recognizing that it took the journey for us to get there, and that's part of the vision. Okay, when we see the vision for what it actually is, we can have a bit more compassion for ourselves and how long it may have taken, or the patience, or the lessons, or the healing, or whatever. Oh my God, look at the size of this thing. Yeah, no wonder it took a bit of backwards and forwards. A bit like childbirth, okay? So the head will come out and it'll come down and it'll go back and it'll go up, and it's getting to that point of no return, okay? And that's what we're really being faced with this week, that point of no return. But we may have that backwards and forwards discomfort, just to stretch us up, just to try and avoid any damage, just to allow the universal forces to come in. And it's not to say that we haven't got free will, of course we have, based on the experience of it. There are some things that are out of our control. There are some things that have moved on. There are some energies that need to be with other people now. Some views, some businesses, some approaches, whatever, that other people now must be taking the baton for. However, our experience, how we choose to experience something, has always been our choice, and that cannot be taken from us. And it's that we're going to face on the Thursday with the new moon. What did we experience here? That's up to us. That's up to our perspective. Go back to the heart. Always go back to the heart. Always go back to what it was you loved. Always go back to in the background you have the deer here, and I always see the deer as a gentle feminine energy. Always go back to nurturing whatever is coming up this week, including the masculine, especially the masculine. That drive can be quite, and it can, I know myself, it can always be quite rejected because it's comes across as quite direct. So nurturing that, nurturing the idea of lightness, nurturing the idea of things being easy and graceful and flowing and connecting and falling into the arms of a natural pattern of love and lust and sensuality and desire, nurturing these aspects within us and our ability to just feel them and act on them. Really sensing into that on the Thursday is going to be key, because it's that on the Friday that's going to give us a physical new beginning. Okay, so what am I seeing here? It reminds me of the 80s. This card reminds me of an 80s like energy, and you know, for me the 80s is my childhood era. So yes, there is some childhood energy there, but in the 80s, my era's ringing. In the 80s was also a time where quite a lot of differences were accepted. You know, we had a lot of different music, a lot of different fashions, a lot of different ways of being. How accepting are we with that in our lives, but also with ourselves? all these different versions of us. The more accepting of different versions we can be within our own physical expressions of life itself, the more open we can be to new ones trying to come through. I hear the song "You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet." Okay, so what do we do when we allow things to transmute and to move forward? What we're actually doing is making space for something new. Someone asked me the other day, what does it mean to hold space? Well, to hold space for me is to hold space, to be completely full of emptiness so that things can come through. So even though now a lot is coming through, I feel very empty in the most beautiful way. So I'm open and I'm receiving, like the Lovers card, but the masculine, the Sami, the spirit is coming through and it's coming out into words. And that is what we're facing on the Friday, that ability to channel in anything physically that we now need in order to move us forward. But of course, we must be accepting of all the different versions of us. We must be, you know, the 80s was like, there's so many musicals in the 80s, right? And life was, for me personally, a bit more musical. You could burst into song. It was a bit more enjoyable, a bit more embodied. So on the Friday, what helps you to do that? What helps you to be more embodied? What helps you to want to feel as if you're going to burst into song? What helps you want to get up in the morning? It's not a job, it's not a person, it's not a way of being, it's a vibration. And it's that we're actually bringing in on a cellular level, and it is different. So yes, I have said the last few weeks there's this more direct energy that wants to come through. It feels Atlantean. There's also been, over the last few days with some of the people I've worked with, a more cave woman like or caveman like energy coming in as well. So we have really high energy and really old grounded energy, and they are uniting within us all. That is trying to come through. So what's going to help us to deliver that? When we talk about the backwards and forwards with transition and with change or childbirth or whatever that may be, the biggest hormone that's needed is oxytocin. I hear testosterone, but that's for me. Or is it? Who knows? But the biggest energy we normally need is oxytocin, love. Okay, so what areas of our life do we love not as much as we could? Come the Friday, that's going to be key if we want to move forward. And on the Saturday, that is where I see the masculine energy here. With the Two of Wands on the Saturday, it isn't quite time to make those decisions yet, but it is time to be aware of them, and it is time to feel them in our physical body. It is time to be enticed by what may potentially be asked of us following the new moon leading into the Capricorn full moon. That Capricorn full moon feels like quite a biggie actually in regards to, so Capricorn for me is my midhaven. That's where I'm actually headed. That's the energy I need to work towards. And this week, excuse me, that does feel like that's what's going on. We are being gifted an opportunity to see the energy that we are being asked to take forward, but also to work towards, and keeping that in balance. And this key is, it's not actually just with my own, but the key is here with the masculine. It is in how we take what we know and do what we do as a result. And on Saturday, we're going to be shown that for good or bad, sickness and in health. Yeah, there's that sacred union with all aspects of ourselves, and being open to see that, being open to see the impact on our path, open to see the impact on the very ground that we walk, open to see just how rooted we are in that before we start taking those actions. Why? Because on the Sunday, those new beginnings that we felt on the Friday physically, we're not quite mature enough in our femininity yet. We don't quite know what we're feeling. You know, if we have a new version of our own masculinity come in, or a new partner or a new job or whatever that may be, a new way of acting coming in, hence it is new, so we're not going to quite know what's going on. So on the Sunday, it's an opportunity to integrate that within our feminine, to ensure that we are ready to receive. It needs to be informed consent. What is it we're actually opening ourselves up to receive this week? We may not have all the answers, but we will know how it will make us feel, and as a result, how mature we feel in handling that, okay, in our physical vessels. So, swig of the tea, because that's the other thing, right? When it comes too quickly, it can really give us a thirst, and that feels like key. What are we actually thirsting for this week? Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3 major arcanas. I hear time. I'm thirsting for time. I'm acutely aware that it doesn't matter how I do these readings, they will take as long as they take, and there's a real patience there that is needed. You know, I've come in guns a-blazing, gone straight in, and it's going to take as long as it normally does. And there's a almost humorous message in that it will take as long as it takes. Doesn't matter what approach you take, whether that's healing, whether that's work, relationships, whatever. It's going to take as long as is needed. And being open to that with the three major arcanas that we have. So we have three with the majors. So any birth, any creations, any movement forward this week. I was going to say this year, so that's interesting. This week for the rest of the year could be something worth looking into. Whatever comes up this week is going to have an impact for the remainder of the year at least. But it's going to come through in the form of the major fates here. Now, that's not to say that we don't have control, but the control we have is what we are willing to open ourselves up to in the Magician, what we are willing to see from ourselves and what is being asked of us in the Star, and the choices we then make as a result. Okay, so we can see our potential, we don't have to act on it. And that really is the view this week with the major arcanas. Of course, there will come a time when it gets more and more uncomfortable, and like anything, birth naturally occurs. But yeah, recognizing that we can see our potential, but it is another to actually fulfill it. And also acknowledging that in each moment we're fulfilling it as well, because we have the eight of swords here, and there's almost a view of, I could be doing so much better, I could be doing so much more. That has got a bit of a self-sabotage energy, a frustration energy there, but also there's a difference between expectation and attachment. A real difference here. An expectation when it comes from the heart is more like a hope type energy. Attachment when it comes from how things should be, yeah, that can come from a more mental, tormented mindset for a need for perfection, or yeah, a belief we have to be a certain way. And when we come at things from that position perspective, our heart isn't as open as it could be. So being very aware of that this week. Okay, so again, it takes as long as it takes. Yes, we don't have to reach our potential, but also acknowledging that in every waking moment we kind of are as well. So it's like that paradox. Okay, we have that stretching and being asked to push a little bit, to grow a little bit, but also that pulling back of, I can't actually do this, and da-da-da. It's a backwards, forwards, conflicting contraction of creation this week. And yeah, it's there if we can open our eyes to it and recognize that we are free to decide in each moment what we're willing to put in, and that choice has to come from our heart. So we do have one, we'll put that there, that there. We have one sword card, and again, that is that mental attitude, and that's where it all resides. We're in Gemini, right? Where is our head at in regards to everything we're trying to do? If we're trying to heal something and we're frustrated because it's taking so long, that may not be the energy that you need in order to shift that. It may just be acceptance of where you actually are. Recognizing best will in the world, all well-meaning intentions, where are they actually coming from, our own included. So are we healing and shifting from a place of love, or are we doing it from a place of not being good enough? And what impact is that actually having in relationships, in jobs, whatever? Where are we actually acting from? It's time to open our eyes to any mental torment that we may have been causing ourselves. And yes, that can be a bit of a kicker, but once we do that, we have the Ace of Cups here. Our heart can be opened. Okay, once we do that, we then have two pentacles here. We have the Ace of Pentacles and the Princess of Pentacles. So those energies are both new beginnings. They're new beginnings in our physical ability to be present in what is going on, but also new beginnings in how we choose to act with that, and remembering that it's a new beginning. So even though these situations may feel as if, oh, I've done this over and over and over, actually to be aware that you've done it before means it's not the same. It can't actually be the same if you've done it before. So giving yourself credit where credit is due is what's going to really mature the energy, and not mature it as in a more grown up perspective, but as in that inner child energy. There's nothing worse than wanting something, even if it's from an inner child perspective, and having our adult self say, well, actually you've done this before, and and why aren't you doing as well as I think you should be doing? So really looking at how we are nurturing those physical changes within us, and how we respond to that more childlike, innocent energy here. Do we allow ourselves to keep our heart open to the potential of who we are, or do we bring in straight away how we think that should be? Being aware of that, being aware of the impact that has on our spirit, on our masculine, gosh, our masculine, absolutely, but also on our connection to the earth, and how grounded we feel on our own path here. So we have this idea, we have this action, we have this yearning, this desire, and straight away, if we come in with all the times that it's happened before, if we come in with all, even if we're trying to heal wounds or do whatever, if that takes over and that action never happens, We're just reiterating the same thing. We're picking at that wound. So being very mindful of the impact that that has on our own masculinity this week, because that will impact how much we're open to receive. If we don't trust our masculine, if the feminine within us doesn't trust our actions, and the feminine, the energy that is there to receive, starts taking over in the doing, that's going to have a real impact on what we're capable of allowing in. So it's really about trusting ourselves and our actions this week. Yes, that may mean that we look back over things that we've done before and what we've enjoyed and what we've discovered and how we've moved forward, but don't stay there. Remember the action. Remember why we went into the feminine in the first place. Okay, so one card overall. Oh, it's turned over. It's turned over and it's the wheel. Okay, remember that this is all part of the process. This is all part of the change. This is all part of drawing a line, if you will, in your own connection to who you are and your place here, and saying, actually, I've done this. Actually, I've figured this out. Actually, I'm going to complete the cycle, whatever that cycle may be. Well, the cycle here is the Six of Cups and the Queen of Swords. Okay, so the cycle here is childhood wounds, perspectives, dreams, visions, whatever, but also how well we can nurture them from a mental angle here. And the Ace of Wands, we finally have the Ace of Wands underneath. Once we do that, that deer from the Lovers has actually turned into a masculine energy, and it's that's going to move us forward. Our spiritual energy is what's going to move us forward, with the Six of Wands underneath. And I can keep going. That's the key. Keep going. Get the signs, but keep moving with the actions this week. Sometimes we need a lot of confirmation, and that's great, but is it helping us to move forward, or is it just conforming a nation that we are used to? Is it just reaffirming stories that have outlived their purpose, our own included? Take care, have a wonderful, wonderful week, and I wish you the most beautiful union, however that may come about. Take care.